My brother stole my childhood savings. Now he's furious. I won't help him buy a house. The past never stays buried. It lurks beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to claw its way back, demanding to be acknowledged. I had spent years pretending it didn't matter, convincing myself that the betrayal was nothing more than a painful lesson in trust. But when my brother Daniel showed up at my doorstep after years of silence, his face twisted with forced warmth, I knew that the ghosts of my stolen childhood had come back to haunt me. I stood in the doorway, gripping the frame, as if it could anchor me in place. The sight of him was both foreign and familiar, the same entitled smirk, the same air of self-assurance, but there was something else now. Desperation. He had aged in a way that had nothing to do with years. There were creases in his forehead that hadn't been there before, dark circles beneath his eyes, and a stiffness in his posture that spoke of a man who had come face to face with his own limitations. I didn't invite him inside. "You look good," he said, stuffing his hands into the pockets of his expensive-looking jeans. Even now, he carried himself like someone who had never known true struggle. The golden child, the favored son, the one who could do no wrong. I didn't return the compliment. "What do you want, Daniel?" My voice was steady, but I could feel the old bitterness rising in my throat like bile. His smile faltered just for a second before he recovered. "Come on, no small talk. No, how have you been?" I arched an eyebrow. "Last time we talked, you told me to get over it, so why don't you skip the niceties and tell me why you're really here?" His jaw tightened. "Fine. I need help." There it was, the real reason. The only reason he had come. I crossed my arms over my chest and waited. "I'm trying to buy a house," he continued, as if that fact alone should be enough to elicit sympathy. "I've got a solid down payment, but with the market the way it is, I'm short. Just a little. A loan, a gift, whatever you want to call it." I felt a slow, cold burn creep up my spine. The audacity was staggering, but what truly infuriated me was the expectation in his voice, the assumption that I, of all people, would be the one to bail him out. I let the silence stretch between us, heavy and unyielding, and then I laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was sharp, edged with something raw and years in the making. Daniel's face darkened. He didn't like being laughed at. "You think this is funny?" I shook my head, still chuckling. "You know, it's actually hilarious, because I remember a time when I needed help, when I needed that little bit of extra money to secure my future, but I didn't get it, did I? Because someone stole it." His expression twisted into something defensive. "Are we really bringing that up again? That was years ago." "Yes, it was," I agreed. "Years ago, when I spent every birthday, every part-time paycheck, every single dime I could spare, saving for my future. And then one day, it was gone, every last cent. Because you took it." His lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't—" "Don't lie to me," I cut him off. "You know damn well what you did." His nostrils flared. "It was just money. I was young. I made mistakes." I leaned in, lowering my voice to something dangerous. "You didn't just make a mistake, Daniel. You ruined my start in life. You laughed in my face when I asked for it back. You called me bitter and pathetic. Our parents told me to get over it because siblings share. But we both know that wasn't sharing. That was theft." His face was turning red now, a mix of anger and embarrassment. "I paid for it, all right? I lost it all. I was stupid, I get it. But you—" He gestured vaguely at the house behind me, at the life I had built with my own 2 hands. "You made it. You didn't need it. Clearly you're doing fine." "Because I worked for it," I snapped. "Because I started from nothing while you were out there spending my money like it was your personal lottery win. And now you want me to just hand over more?" He scoffed, shaking his head. "It's just a loan. I'll pay you back." I let that hang in the air for a moment, then gave him a slow, measured look. "Like you paid me back last time?" His mouth snapped shut. "That's what I thought." I expected him to argue, to keep pushing, to demand that I fulfill some imagined obligation as his sibling. But what I didn't expect was the shift in his expression, the flicker of something deeper, something uglier. "You don't get it," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "You think I had it easy? You think I was just some spoiled kid blowing money for fun? You have no idea what Mom and Dad did." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" He exhaled sharply, like he had just let something slip he hadn't meant to. He turned away slightly, his fingers curling into fists. I stepped forward. "Daniel, what did they do?" He shook his head, reluctant, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. I saw the weight of whatever secret he was holding on to, and I wasn't about to let him walk away without answers. "Tell me," I demanded. And then he did. And the betrayal I had carried for so long deepened into something far worse, something I never saw coming. Silence stretched between us like a taut wire, humming with the weight of unsaid truths. Daniel's jaw clenched, his fingers twitching as if he wanted to shove his hands into his pockets, but thought better of it. He had always been good at keeping secrets, hiding behind half-truths and misdirections, letting the world see only what he wanted them to. But something in him had cracked just now, and I wasn't about to let him patch it back up. "You started this," I said, my voice razor-sharp, "so finish it. What did Mom and Dad do?" He let out a long, slow breath, his shoulders sagging. The bravado peeled away, leaving something raw beneath it, and that unsettled me more than anything, because Daniel never showed weakness. If he was doing it now, it meant whatever he was about to say was worse than I could have imagined. He looked up at me then, his eyes unreadable. "You really want to know?" I crossed my arms, keeping my stance firm. "I wouldn't be asking if I didn't." A bitter laugh slipped from his lips. "All right, fine. You think I just stole your money and blew it all, right? That I just walked into your little stash and took it like some greedy little bastard?" He shook his head. "That's not how it happened." I felt my pulse quicken. "Then explain it." Daniel hesitated, like he was weighing whether it was worth it. And then, finally, he spoke. "Mom and Dad gave it to me." My breath caught. A strange ringing filled my ears. The words didn't make sense, not at first. I replayed them in my mind, trying to fit them into a reality where they weren't an outright impossibility. "You're lying," I said. But the words felt hollow. "I'm not," he countered, his voice low. "They gave it to me, every last cent." A coldness spread through me, numbing my fingers, tightening around my ribs. "That doesn't make sense." "It does if you see it from their perspective," Daniel muttered. He rubbed his face, exhaling harshly. "I was drowning. I had debts. I made some bad choices. Okay, a lot of bad choices. And when I went to them, begging for help, they didn't want to use their own money, so they used yours." I took a step back, needing distance. "No." "Yes." I shook my head violently. "They wouldn't do that. They knew how hard I worked for that money. They knew what it meant to me." Daniel's gaze was unwavering. "And they decided that what I needed was more important than what you wanted." The words landed like a punch to the gut. My legs felt unsteady beneath me, but I forced myself to stay upright. I didn't want him to see me break. Not now. Not after everything. "They told me it was just sitting there," he continued, his voice quieter now. "That you were still young, that you'd have plenty of time to save again. And I—" He stopped, swallowing thickly. "I let myself believe them. I didn't think about what it meant for you. I took the money and ran." A sharp, bitter laugh broke from my lips, though there was nothing humorous about any of this. "So let me get this straight. You weren't just a thief. You were an accomplice. You let them rob me blind, and you spent it without a second thought." Daniel flinched, and I knew then that the guilt had been eating at him for years. Not enough to make things right, but enough to haunt him. "Why the hell are you telling me this now?" I demanded, my voice shaking with barely restrained fury. He let out a slow exhale. "Because I thought you should know the truth. Because maybe you'll understand that I wasn't just being some selfish asshole. I was desperate. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream. But more than anything, I wanted to march straight to our parents' house and demand to know why." The betrayal burned deeper now, like a wound I had only just realized had been festering beneath the surface. It wasn't just Daniel. It had never been just Daniel. The very people who were supposed to protect me, to encourage me, had been the ones to strip me bare. And they had never even thought to tell me. Why didn't they ever say anything? I whispered. Daniel let out a bitter chuckle. Because you were never supposed to find out. They assumed you'd get over it, that you'd chalk it up to bad luck or mismanagement. And, well, he spread his arms in a mocking gesture. You did, didn't you? You moved on. You made something of yourself. My hands curled into fists. I didn't move on. I adapted. I clawed my way up because I had no other choice. Do you even understand what you took from me? Daniel's gaze faltered, and for a moment I thought I saw something like shame there. But it wasn't enough. You don't get to play the victim here, I snapped. You had other choices. You could have worked your way out of your mess like I did, but instead, you took the easy way out and let them steal from me. His expression darkened. You think it was easy? You think I didn't hate myself for it? I had to live with that guilt, with the knowledge that I ruined things for you. I stepped closer, my voice like ice. And yet you still had the audacity to come here today and ask for more. His mouth opened, then closed. He had no defense, no justification. Get out, I said, my voice deadly calm. He hesitated, as if considering one last desperate plea. But something in my face must have told him that there was no point, that whatever sliver of brotherhood had once existed between us had been shattered beyond repair. Without another word, he turned and walked away. I stood there for a long time after the door closed behind him, staring at nothing, my mind whirling with too many thoughts to process. And then, finally, I grabbed my keys. Because there was one more conversation I needed to have. And this time, it wasn't going to be with Daniel. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than it should have. Every mile stretched with the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest, suffocating and unrelenting. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached, but I didn't loosen my hold. I couldn't. Not when I was barreling toward the confrontation that had been years in the making. The truth Daniel had dropped on me twisted in my mind like a blade lodged deep in my ribs. My parents had given him my savings, without my knowledge, without a shred of remorse, and had expected me to simply move on, to accept it, to be fine. And I had, hadn't I? I had buried the bitterness, built a new life from the ashes of their betrayal, and convinced myself that I didn't need their approval or their fairness. But now that I knew the depth of their deception, I couldn't ignore it anymore. When I pulled into their driveway, the house looked exactly the same as it always had. A quaint, well-maintained home, the kind that suggested warmth and stability. A lie in physical form. I stepped out of the car, my heartbeat hammering in my ears, and marched up to the front door. I didn't knock, I walked in. The moment I entered, I saw them in the living room, sitting comfortably on their plush couch, watching TV as if they had no worries in the world. My mother looked up first, her face lighting up in surprised delight. "Oh, you should have called first, sweetheart." My father muted the television, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't expect to see you here." I took a slow, deep breath, trying to control the storm inside me. "We need to talk." Something in my tone must have tipped them off that this wasn't a casual visit. My mother sat up straighter, and my father leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "What's wrong?" my mother asked, her voice filled with the artificial concern she had perfected over the years. I looked between them, my pulse pounding. "I know." A flicker of confusion crossed their faces. "Know what?" my father asked carefully. "About the money." The room went still. My mother's smile faltered, and my father's expression turned unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then my mother let out a small, nervous laugh. "What money, sweetheart?" I clenched my jaw. "Don't." Her face tightened. My father exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Daniel told you, didn't he?" "So it's true," I said, my voice cold. Neither of them denied it. They didn't even try. My mother had the audacity to sigh, as if I was the one being difficult. "Honey, you were so young. You didn't need it then. Daniel—" I slammed my hand against the wall, the sharp sound reverberating through the room. "Stop. Just stop. Do you even hear yourselves? Do you even understand what you did?" My father looked at me like I was being dramatic. "It was just money." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Is that the excuse you keep telling yourselves? That it was just money? That you didn't take away my entire future just so you wouldn't have to use your own?" "You don't understand," my mother insisted, shaking her head. "Daniel was in trouble. He was struggling. We did what we had to do for the family. I stared at her in disbelief. And I wasn't part of that family? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. My father shifted uncomfortably. It's not like you suffered, he muttered. You're doing fine now, aren't you? Because I had to be, I snapped. Because I had no choice. Because I had to claw my way out of a hole you threw me into. My mother sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. You're being so dramatic about this. Dramatic? My voice rose with disbelief. You stole from me, and now you sit here acting like it was no big deal? It wasn't theft, my father said stiffly. I laughed again, but this time it was hollow. Then what was it? Neither of them answered. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. I had spent years, thinking that maybe I had just been unlucky, that maybe Daniel had stolen from me because he was reckless and selfish, but that my parents had simply been indifferent, too dismissive to care. But now I knew the truth. They weren't just bystanders in my pain. They had orchestrated it, justified it, buried it, and they didn't even regret it. I took a slow breath, letting the anger settle into something colder, more final. I want the money back. My mother scoffed. Oh, come on. My father sighed. You know we don't have that kind of money just lying around. You had it when Daniel needed it, I said evenly. Find it. Pay me back. Every single cent. My mother shook her head in frustration. You can't be serious? After all these years, you don't even need it. It's not about need, I said. It's about what's right. My father muttered. You're really going to hold a grudge over this forever? I exhaled sharply, finally seeing them for what they were. Not misguided parents who made a mistake. Not well-meaning people who had messed up. They were users. Just like Daniel. They had taken from me because they knew I wouldn't fight back. They had watched me struggle and let me believe it was my own fault. And now they were watching me stand in front of them, demanding justice. And they still didn't care. I let out a slow, controlled breath and nodded to myself. All right then. My mother looked at me warily. All right, what? I met her gaze with the coldest look I had ever given anyone. I'm done. A frown creased her forehead. What do you mean, done? I stepped back, my voice steady. I mean, you don't get to be my parents anymore. You don't get to act like we're a family. You don't get to call me when you need something, or when you want to pretend like we're all okay. You took from me, and now you get to live with the consequences. My mother's face twisted in panic. Wait. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. We're still your parents, she called desperately. I didn't stop. No, you're not. I walked out, slamming the door behind me, and this time I wasn't looking back. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. No phone calls, no desperate attempts at reconciliation, just silence. And it didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. Daniel had tried reaching out once, sending a half-hearted text that read, Look, I know things got ugly, but we're still family. Let's not do something we'll regret. I had stared at the message for a long moment, before deleting it without responding. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. I wasn't going to be their scapegoat anymore. I wasn't going to be the backup plan, the emergency fund, the one who always had to be the bigger person. They had stolen from me, lied to me, betrayed me, and they had expected me to just live with it. But I wasn't going to live with it. My brother stole my inheritance and fled the country, but I tracked him down. Betrayal, when it comes from a stranger, is a wound, but when it comes from blood, it is a festering rot that seeps into the marrow, poisoning everything it touches. I never believed I could hate my own brother, but as I stood outside his luxurious villa, staring up at the grand balcony where he no doubt lounged without a care in the world, I felt nothing but an all-consuming rage. He had stolen from me, not just money, but the security our parents had worked their entire lives to provide. He had bled my accounts dry, drained our father's carefully managed investments, and left me to pick through the ruins of what should have been my future. And when I had confronted the banks, the lawyers, the so-called family friends, who had been so eager to shake their heads and mutter condolences, they had all said the same thing. He's gone. You'll never get that money back. They underestimated me. My brother had always been reckless, but he was not careful. He had a pattern. Years of gambling, debts, desperate escapes, empty promises, and smooth lies. He was the kind of man who thought he was clever because he had never been caught, because he had always been given the benefit of the doubt, because people like our parents had cleaned up after him time and time again. But he had never faced someone like me, someone who wasn't going to forget, someone who would hunt him down to the ends of the earth and make sure he paid for what he had done. I had followed the breadcrumbs he had left behind, his arrogance betraying him at every turn. A bank transaction here, a suspicious wire transfer there, a fake passport obtained with laughable subtlety. He thought he was a ghost, disappearing without a trace, but he left fingerprints on everything he touched. And so I traced them, step by step, across cities and continents, until they led me here, to this sprawling mansion in a foreign land, where my brother had built himself a new life on the ruins of mine. And now, it was time to take it back. The night was humid, the air thick with the scent of sea salt and expensive cologne. This was a city where the rich came to play, where stolen wealth turned into silk suits and expensive furniture. It suited my brother perfectly. He had always been the kind of man who wanted to live large, to surround himself with people who mistook excess for power. I blended into the shadows, watching the house. It was easy to see where the money had gone. Sleek imported cars lined the driveway, their polished surfaces gleaming under the golden glow of security lights. Music throbbed from the upper floors, a private party spilling onto the grand terrace. He was in there somewhere, laughing, drinking, celebrating a victory he had no right to claim. I had two choices. I could storm in, expose him in front of his new friends, drag him down in a public spectacle that would see his carefully crafted life crumble to dust. Or I could play this smart. Take my time. Let him believe, for just a little longer, that he was safe. I adjusted my jacket, ran a hand over the forged ID in my pocket, and walked up to the entrance, as if I belonged. Getting inside was laughably easy. Money blinded people, made them careless. The doorman barely glanced at my invitation, one I had intercepted from a courier earlier that evening, a minor inconvenience to a much bigger plan. The interior of the mansion was a temple to excess. Crystal chandeliers dripped from high ceilings. Walls were lined with art that had likely been stolen or bought with stolen money. And everywhere I turned, people lounged in careless luxury, sipping golden liquor from delicate glasses, draped in expensive fabric that hid their rotting souls. But I wasn't here for them. I spotted him easily. My brother had never been subtle. He stood at the heart of the room, surrounded by admirers, his laughter too loud, his suit too sharp, his arrogance unmistakable. He had gained weight. Fine living had softened him, but his eyes still carried that glint of calculation, the ever-present hunger for more. He hadn't changed. He never would. I could have ended it right there. Walked up, whispered a single word in his ear, watched his face drain of color as he realized his past had come to collect. But I didn't. Not yet. Because simply confronting him wasn't enough. I wanted more than just justice. I wanted ruin. So instead, I watched. I listened. I studied the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way his new friends fawned over him without realizing they were merely stepping stones on his path to further wealth. And as I observed, a new plan began to form. He had stolen from me once. Now, I would steal everything from him. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. The first step was information. My brother was sloppy, trusting the wrong people, making deals without caution. It took less than a day to find the cracks in his empire. A business partner with a grudge, a mistress who whispered too much when given the right incentive, a corrupt official who had been paid to look the other way, but was just desperate enough to sell secrets when pushed in the right direction. The more I dug, the more I found. Fraud, money laundering, unpaid debts hidden under layers of shell companies. He had built his life on stolen funds, and like any house of cards, all it needed was a well-placed nudge to send it tumbling down. I left breadcrumbs of my own. A tip to an investigator here, a strategically leaked document there. His accounts were under scrutiny before he even realized someone was moving against him. By the time he did, it was too late. The authorities would come soon enough. But I wasn't done yet. First, I wanted to see his face when he realized everything he had taken was slipping from his grasp. So I waited. And when the moment was right, I walked through his front door and made sure he saw me. His smile faltered instantly. The color drained from his face. He tried to mask it, but I saw the flicker of panic, the way his fingers tightened around his glass, the way his stance shifted ever so slightly, an instinctive preparation for flight. "Hello, brother," I said, letting the words drip with the weight of the past. He forced a chuckle, masking his unease with practiced ease. Well, I didn't expect to see you here. What brings you to this side of the world?" I smiled. Slow, calculated, a predator enjoying the last moments before the kill. "You did." My brother always had a way of talking himself out of bad situations. It was a talent he had honed since childhood, spinning lies like silk, manipulating emotions with ease, making people believe in him just long enough for him to get what he wanted before disappearing into the wind. But as he stood before me now, in the gilded prison he had built with my inheritance, I saw something I had never seen in him before. Fear. He masked it well, of course, he always did. His lips curled into that familiar smirk. The one that had charmed our parents, deceived his friends, convinced countless people that he was just a misunderstood soul who made mistakes but always had the best intentions. But I saw through it. I had spent too many years studying the man he had become to be fooled by the mask he wore. He gestured to the lavish lounge, a silent invitation to sit, to chill, to pretend that we were just two siblings catching up after years apart. I didn't move. I wasn't here for pleasantries. "I have to admit," he said, pouring himself a glass of something expensive, his hands steady despite the tension in his jaw. "I didn't think you had it in you." "Had what in me?" I asked, my voice cold, controlled. "To track me down." He took a sip, watching me over the rim of his glass. "To find me in a city where no one was supposed to find me. You're full of surprises." I leaned against the marble-topped table, my eyes never leaving his. "You're not as hard to find as you think. You left a trail." His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A trail? I don't think so. I covered my tracks well." I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch between us, watching as the doubt seeped in. My brother thrived on confidence, on believing he was always the smartest man in the room. The moment he began questioning himself was the moment I had already won the first battle. "I know about the shell companies," I said, letting the words drop like stones into still water. "The offshore accounts, the missing funds that are suddenly raising red flags with the authorities here. Your partners are starting to sweat, and you know what happens when criminals start to panic, don't you?" The smirk faltered, just slightly, but I saw it. His fingers drummed against the crystal glass, a measured, thoughtful rhythm. "You've been busy." "You stole from me," I said simply. "Did you really think I would just walk away?" He exhaled a slow breath, setting his glass down with a soft clink. "It wasn't personal," he said, feigning regret. "It was just an opportunity." I let out a humorless laugh. "You ruined my life, and you call it an opportunity?" His expression shifted, an old arrogance creeping back in. "Look, I know you're angry, but let's be honest here. You were never cut out for that kind of money. You would have wasted it. I did you a favor." My fingers curled into fists at my sides. Even now, standing face to face with the consequences of his betrayal, he still believed he was in the right. But I didn't come here for an apology. I came here for something far more satisfying. I let my anger fade into a smile. A slow, knowing smile that made my brother shift in his seat. "You always think you're the smartest one in the room," I mused. "That's your problem. You underestimate people. You underestimate me." He scoffed. "Please. What are you going to do, drag me to the police? Good luck with that. Do you know how much I've paid to keep them in my pocket?" I shrugged. "I don't need the police." His brow furrowed, the first sign of genuine unease creeping in. "Then what do you want?" I leaned in slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to watch you lose everything." The silence between us was thick, suffocating. My brother, for the first time, didn't have a quick response. The next 48 hours were a slow unraveling of everything he had built. I didn't need to attack him directly, not yet. All I had to do was pull at the weakest threads, and his empire began to fray on its own. The business partners who had once sworn loyalty to him suddenly found themselves under scrutiny from tax officials. A quiet leak of sensitive documents to the right journalists ignited a storm of speculation. A few well-placed whispers in the underbelly of the city ensured that certain dangerous people my brother owed money to, began looking for him with new interest. And through it all, I watched. I watched as his phone calls became more frantic, as his usual bravado cracked under the pressure of growing paranoia, as the easy confidence he had always worn like armor slowly chipped away, revealing something raw and vulnerable beneath. On the third night, I saw the first real sign of desperation. I had been keeping my distance, biding my time, but when I saw him slip out of the mansion in the dead of night, I knew he was running. Again, I followed. He moved through the back streets of the city with a familiarity that told me he had done this before, escaping in the dark, planning his next move. He ducked into a low-lit club, the kind of place where people with too much money and too many secrets came to make deals. I didn't need to get too close to know what he was doing. He was looking for a way out, a new identity, a new escape plan. But this time, I wouldn't let him disappear. I waited, watched from the shadows as he made his arrangements. And when he left the lounge, stepping into the humid night with the weight of his downfall pressing heavy on his shoulders, I made my move. He barely had time to register my presence before I grabbed him, shoving him into a secluded alleyway. His back hit the brick wall with a dull thud, his eyes wide, furious. "What the hell?" I pressed my forearm against his chest, pinning him in place. "Running again?" I whispered, my voice sharp as a blade. "Where were you planning to go this time?" His breath was ragged, his mind racing for an answer. I saw the gears turning, the calculations shifting. "I don't know what you're talking about." I chuckled, low and dark. "You're a terrible liar when you're afraid." He struggled against my grip, but I didn't let go. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," he spat. "You think you're smart? You think you've won? You have no idea who I've been working with." I leaned in close, so close that I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. "And they have no idea that you're about to be worthless to them." Panic flickered in his eyes. I let the words sink in. He had spent years playing the game, thinking he was untouchable. But now, the walls were closing in. I stepped back, letting him gasp for air, watching as his mind scrambled for a way out. He had always been good at talking himself into better situations, but there was no talking his way out of this one. Because I wasn't just here to take my inheritance back. I was here to destroy him. There comes a moment in every long game when the scales finally tip. A single breath where the hunted realizes they have no more places to run, no more lies to spin, no more tricks to pull. I had been waiting for that moment, carefully dismantling every foundation my brother had built, watching him scramble to patch the cracks, only to find that there was nothing left to hold him up. And now, I was finally ready to deliver the final blow. I let him go that night in the alley. Not out of mercy. There was none left in me for him, but because his panic would do my work for me. Desperate men make mistakes, and I needed him to make the biggest mistake of his life. I needed him to be so consumed by fear that he would finally stop thinking 2 steps ahead and start acting recklessly. It took less than 24 hours for him to snap. I had been tracking him through the network of informants I had woven around his world. A few bribes to the right people, his house staff, his driver, the guards who were supposed to protect him, and I knew every move he made. By the following evening, he was pacing the floors of his mansion, calling every contact he had, trying to liquidate whatever assets he could still access before they were frozen. He wasn't just planning to run, he was planning to disappear completely. That was when I knew it was time. I walked through his front door as if I owned the place. The guards at the gate had already been paid to look the other way. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. His staff had been conveniently dismissed for the evening. Everything had been arranged down to the smallest detail, ensuring my brother was truly alone. He was in his office, hunched over his desk, shuffling through paperwork with a frantic energy I had never seen in him before. He didn't notice me at first, too caught up in the mess he had created. But when he finally did, he froze. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. He looked different now, exhausted, hollowed out, his once pristine suit rumpled, dark circles carving into his skin. The charm, The arrogance, the effortless confidence, it was all gone. What was left was a man who had spent his entire life running, only to finally find himself at the edge of a cliff with nowhere else to go. "You," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Me," I agreed, stepping further into the room, shutting the door behind me. His gaze darted toward the drawer where he kept his gun. I shook my head. "Don't." He hesitated, considered his options, realized he had none. And then, as if finally understanding just how much he had lost, he let out a bitter, broken laugh. "You really won't let this go, will you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair, looking at me as if he barely recognized me anymore. "All right. Fine. You win. What do you want? You want the money? Take it. I'll wire you whatever I have left." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "You think this is about money?" Confusion flickered in his eyes. He had always believed that money was the only thing that mattered, that if he had enough of it, he could buy his way out of anything. But he didn't understand, had never understood, that some debts couldn't be paid off. Some sins couldn't be erased. "You didn't just steal from me," I said quietly, stepping closer. "You took everything. My future. My security. You left me with nothing but debt and ruin while you built this life for yourself, thinking you'd never have to answer for it." His lips parted, as if he wanted to argue, but he didn't, because he knew I was right. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a thick folder and tossing it onto his desk. "Do you know what this is?" He eyed it warily, then hesitantly flipped it open. The color drained from his face. Evidence. Bank statements. Illegal transfers. Confidential emails. Names of people who wouldn't hesitate to turn on him the moment they realized their own necks were on the line. It was everything. A meticulously compiled collection of every crime he had ever committed, neatly organized and ready to be delivered to the authorities, to the media, to the people he had spent years deceiving. "You think I don't know what you've done?" I continued. "You didn't just steal from me. You stole from your investors, from your so-called friends, from men who don't forgive debts the way our parents did." His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Where did you get all this?" I tilted my head. "I told you. You underestimate me." Panic was setting in now, crawling into his bones, making him shake. "Listen," he started, his voice shaking. We can fix this. We can make a deal. You don't have to do this." I leaned over the desk, meeting his terrified gaze. "You still don't get it, do you?" I whispered. "This isn't about making a deal. This is about making sure you never do this to anyone ever again." He shook his head violently. "You're my brother." I laughed softly. "And you were supposed to be mine." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then I slid another document across the desk. This one was much simpler. Just a few pages, printed neatly, with a pen placed beside it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Your confession," I said. "A full admission of everything you've done. Every lie, every theft, every deal. A signed statement that will make sure you take the fall for all of it." He recoiled. No way." I shrugged. "Fine. Then everything in that folder goes public. The police get their copy. So do the people you owe money to. You'll be rotting in a cell or a ditch by the end of the week. Your choice." He stared at the paper as if it were a death sentence, which in a way it was. He swallowed hard. "And if I sign this?" I leaned back. "You disappear. No money, no power, no second chances. You leave this city, this country, and you never come back. You live the rest of your miserable life knowing that you lost everything." He hesitated. But he knew, just as I did, that he had no way out. With shaking hands, he picked up the pen, and he signed. The next morning, my brother was gone. By the time the authorities arrived, they found everything they needed neatly placed on his desk: signed confessions, financial records, undeniable proof of his crimes. But he was already on the first flight out, using the last of his stolen money to buy himself an escape he would never return from. I stood outside his mansion as they raided it, watching as his world collapsed, as his name was dragged through the headlines, as everything he had built crumbled to dust. And since all of this began, I felt something close to peace. Not because I had gotten my money back. That was never the point. But because I had done what no one else had ever done. I had held him accountable,